What's up, everybody? Here we go. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. The way this works is you ask me questions and I give you my best answers. So just go ahead and enter your question there in the chat. Feel free. Let me just see what we got going on here. So while everybody is getting ready, getting their questions ready, I wanted to talk a little bit about the tongue. Good friend of mine, Chris Johnson, voice teacher, and I saw he's doing a whole training on the tongue. And the tongue is something that I always knew was important, but my work with Carrie Obert, who's done a lot of work in this area and really using endoscopies, getting a camera down the throat to see what's going on. She's done over 20,000. And she has noticed that the tongue is absolutely vital for vocal balance, acoustic balance. It also, just because of the way everything connects, it's really pretty important for the vocal folds as well, because nothing lives in isolation. But to get the right acoustics, your tongue really tunes in resonance. And we tend to think of resonance as just being one thing. And we tend to focus mostly on this lower resonance because that's where most of our problems occur. If you feel like you're straining, you're shouting, you're flipping, you are likely trying to take this lower resonance too high, and that's done by squeezing the throat and widening the mouth. But once you get up and over into your bridge and into your upper register, that second resonance becomes incredibly important for tuning, for tone, for balance, for strength, all of these things. And the lever for this second resonance is the tongue. And really learning to work the tongue and move the tongue is incredibly important. I will tell you a really good position for the tongue when you're singing high. It's kind of like an eh. Think of the tongue as like a crouching cat. I know Chris Johnson will talk about a cat hissing, but the position of your tongue, it's not tense in that it's tight, but I think that this idea of tongue tension, because that can be a problem, the tongue has gotten a bit of a bad rap, and then people just leave the tongue too loose and floppy. That's not helpful either. But this little hey, you can sing much higher. If my tongue's all loose, hey, I need that hey, and then I can start accessing those higher notes because I'm tuning that second resonance to the upper frequencies. Let me see. Ethan has a question. Controversial. Why aren't there many SLS vocal coaches or IVA or any of those initially trained in these approaches to teaching in many universities in the UK? There aren't many in the UK, and a lot of people find it, I'm thinking, controversial is the second. So I was initially trained in SLS. SLS really as an organization no longer exists. If someone is saying they're an SLS coach, they were probably trained in it, maybe even certified in it, but to the best of my knowledge, there is no more SLS certification. Seth Riggs has kind of pulled that back and just holds it to himself now. IVA, I will tell you, and this is my thought on it, is most of the teachers who come in to SLS or IVA to train in that, they are learning to be not just trained in that pedagogy, but also the business model is one of the independent voice teacher. And the independent voice teacher runs their own business, has their own studio, has their own students. University, it's a different thing. I have taught, I've guest lectured at universities. I taught one semester at USC as an adjunct professor. I was actually subbing for a colleague of mine. So I did one semester. And I will tell you, I did it for the resume because the pay was pretty low compared to what I can make in my own studio. Also, teaching at a university, it requires that you get on their ladder and fulfill their requirements. And there are fantastic teachers at universities. I mean, some of my voice teacher heroes are in the university system. But people who seek out IVA and teaching that more contemporary, they're going to tend to run their own studios. So I hope that answers your question. Let me see. Anyone else? I want to make sure I'm getting all the questions here. Let's see. Yep, just throw your questions there in the comments. Does that answer your question, Ethan? Have you trained with an IVS or SLS teacher? I'm just curious. And I think the controversy comes from the way it was aggressively marketed. I think SLS back in the day, I think elements of it were a little combative and setting itself apart from other methods. So that's also part of the controversy. Let's see. Have I ever met Dimash? No, I have not. No. When does the vocal folds go stronger together with a high versus low larynx? Let's see. Please, Max Hit, let me know if I'm answering this correctly, if I'm understanding your question. When you're singing higher, right? I'm gonna guess you're talking about the upper register because you're not really going to get usually a high larynx in the lower register. So part of the equation is indeed the vocal folds being stronger, and being stronger, what you want is the vocal folds, they come together, right? When we're singing in falsetto, they're just barely touching. Ooh, ooh. So if we, hey, we start getting a little more depth of contact. The other part of the equation is how long the vocal folds stay closed. So the longer they stay closed, the more energy. Actually, when your vocal folds open, what happens is this energy that's created by the alternating high and low pressures in the vocal tract is brought more to stability. It's brought more to a baseline, so there's not as much movement in the vocal tract. It's just air moving through. And then when they close, you get that low pressure followed by high pressure, and it kicks it in. Now, is it versus low larynx or high larynx, so you're going to get more strength? Initially, you're going to get different colors, yeah? A higher larynx is going to have a thinner sound. A lower larynx is going to have a bit of a richer sound, warmer sound in a way. If the larynx is high because you're yelling, that's one thing. But let's set that aside. Let's say you're not yelling. You can actually be strong with both a higher and a lower larynx. But I think most people, when they really hear more of a robust sound, they think a little more opera, but the larynx is sitting down a little bit more, right? It brings out a little more of the lower frequencies in the sound wave. It really is the vocal tract tuning. So you can get that high sound. So look, so I've been working on this Tom Jones song, Delilah. And he sings the word she on this high A. And if I do it with a high larynx, she, but if I drop the larynx, she was my woman. I can get a little more richness. So you can play with that. But if the larynx is too low, I can't get the note. So it really is, it's not that a high larynx or a low larynx is better. At the extremes, they start being inefficient. And, but you can actually use it for color and you can play with it. And getting in with like a high larynx and those little edgy sounds, twangy sounds can be a good way to start finding those higher notes. Jay. Okay. Can I expand on what is good tongue tension and what is bad tension? Maybe you could go into negative tension in general, jaw, throat, how we can avoid it or reverse it in our singing. So basically, let me see. Bad tension is usually caused by the body compensating for an imbalance. And it starts to be out of our control, right? So if I'm really struggling and really tense, everything's just jammed up and I don't really have any flexibility with it. Now, good tension is a proper amount of muscle. So here, I'm going to pick up this water bottle. If I use too much tension, right, I'm going to send it flying. Not enough, and I'm going to drop it. There's a proper amount. There is a balance. It's harder to have this feel within our voice because we don't have the same connection as we do with our fingers in terms of mind-body connection. And the tongue, surprisingly, for being this huge muscle in our mouth that we use all the time, we don't really have a properly mapped perception of it. So body mapping can be very helpful, and doing different exercises like just gently biting the front of the tongue and then swallowing. And you can feel the back move independent of the front. And then you can hold the front out and move the back of the tongue back. And I can feel myself pulling back. You know, and you can make those little Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens, rest in peace, Pee Wee Herman sounds, to feel that the back of that tongue working in. In general, right, we don't want excess tension in the jaw. But where we really don't want tension is right on the vocal folds. So it's a process of when you're singing and you feel what you think is excess tension, take a moment, maybe even touch that part, give it a little tap, awaken it in your nervous system, yeah? And then silently sing a note. And feel that, do everything but make sound and see if any tension starts to spring. I remember when I was first learning to sing, I would think of a note and my larynx would jam up. So it took a little while to override that. But it really is, it's paying attention to these parts of the body, playing with your voice and the parts of your voice, not always working extremes. Sometimes we're always chasing range, power, and spend more time in the lower part of your voice, the middle part of your voice. For the lower voice or the male voice, it's incredibly important, I feel, to work this area starting at the B flat below middle C up to about this D, because you're going to feel a little shift in resonance there. You're not quite in what people will call mix, but you really start to have to control the vocal tract, the tuning. You're going to feel a shift in resonance. So spending time there and doing that. Let me see, Ethan, where is the scientific evidence for SLS? It works it works, but there's no formal studies, statistics, etc. Why is it the only method that works? Well, Ethan, I will tell you, I don't believe it's the only method that works, but if it works for you, that's fantastic. I will also tell you, doing studies, proper studies, is incredibly expensive and it's time intensive. And so to my knowledge, nobody has really looked at SLS to try and put it under a formal study. And I will also say you have people that will claim an SLS lineage. Everything gets interpreted through the teacher and they bring their own thing to it, which I think is wonderful. But this idea of what is exactly pure SLS, that's also a question that can be debated. Now, some of the tenets of SLS, particularly vowel modification, because vowel modification is going to be one of the first things that you learn to do in order to stop what they will say pulling chest voice. And vowel modification has been studied greatly, and the reasons why it works, and voice acoustics. So there actually is a lot of evidence as to why that works. And also some of the twangy exercises they do, these exaggerations, these are used by other methods. And there's plenty of studies as to why this works as well. So I don't know if SLS needs, and I'm a decade removed from SLS, so I'm not speaking with authority in 2023. But I think that if you break out elements of it, there are already studies. But yeah, no study I know of that just says, okay, this is looking at SLS. And some of the terminology and the explanations as to why things work are a little controversial. Without getting too deep in the weeds, I think there may be better ways of explaining with our current understanding of science. Doesn't change the exercise, doesn't change that it works. It's just the why it works, I think, could maybe be updated a little bit. But again, I'm 10 years out. I have some problems with coughing, especially if I sing high notes. What to do? So it would appear, at my first thought, is there would be excess tension. And so you are causing irritations at the vocal fold. Coughing, listen, every once in a while, even when we're singing balanced, the vocal folds are vibrating incredibly fast. We'll get caught with a cough. Sometimes I'll feel like I'm singing something well, and then suddenly it's like, ooh, that just irritated my throat for a second. But I would work the voice. I would work the voice a little lower, and I would pay attention to what I was talking about in that kind of upper chest area, and then just getting into your bridge, just around the E flat, E and F, and see what the vocal folds feel like. Feel if you're starting to do an involuntary squeeze there. I've shared this before, but in recent years, actually just in the past year, I was diagnosed with a benign essential vocal tremor, which my voice will want to shake at certain notes. There's no known reason for this, and they don't know what causes it, and there is no known cure, but you can work exercises to help diminish it. And when it was coming on, and I didn't realize that my body was compensating with tension and squeezing. So here's what I would do. If you're feeling this cough, come down lower. Do something like a nice one, right? That's a nice vowel. This wa is going to narrow it. One, 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 one. You should feel a lift. One, 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 one. Up here. One, 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 one. When I get here, one, one. Ooh, there's a little lift for me there. One, 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 one. If I miss that lift, one, one. That's where problems are going to start. So I really want you to pay attention what your voice feels like on this D above middle C, E flat, and E. Those are critical notes. If you're experiencing coughing above that, my guess is you're already feeling the tension down there. And if you spend time really starting to work that out and some good negative exercises, I get this from my work with Carrie Obert because she's helped me incredibly. She's helped me an amazing amount with my tremor. Is just doing negative practice. So I'll make an E, then I'll squeeze a little bit, and then I'll feel the vocal folds. I'll feel that space open up, and I'll even cue with my hands. Cueing is very important. Cueing is something that I was not taught to do early on. Cueing, imagery, they're actually all very powerful. I was very much cause and effect in my early teaching, and that's still a solid foundation of what I do, but cueing and imagery is incredibly important. The key is, though, I don't enforce imagery on a student. If you're working with a teacher and they're using imagery, just be careful and make sure the imagery works for you. So as I do this, my imagery is of this almost like a drum head being pulled tight. It expands. And I have this imagery of expansion. He, rather than he. And then working especially that upper chest into that transition. Joshua, hi, please. I have a question. Ask away, Joshua. Ask this on the forum. So Philip, on the forum, get singing feedback. So yes, so in myvoiceschool.com, we basically have these one-on-one vocal feedback sessions. So anytime anyone is stuck, they can go ahead and get unstuck. So the frequency is, I'm not interested in putting a limit on it, but I do ask members that when you have a vocal check-in, you spend some time working on what it was you were given. These vocal check-ins, look, no one else does this in a membership to my knowledge, and certainly not for what I charge for voice school. So it really is something that I can't have people overusing, like multiple times a week in lieu of voice lessons. It's not in lieu of voice lessons. What it is when you are stuck, when you feel like I'm not sure what to study, I'm having trouble progressing, it is an opportunity to get unstuck. So I don't put a limit on it, right? It's as needed, but I do ask that people are respectful with it. Joshua, how do I make my mixed voice from around F4 to B4 fuller and stronger? It sounds like loud head voice. Everyone says it sounds weird. My full range is C3 all the way up to D7. I'm a 17-year-old male. F5 is still mixed, not head. D6 is head voice. D7 is whistle, which I'm bad at. So, Joshua, first of all, at 17, your voice is still very, very young. Yeah, and for the male voice is definitely still maturing. And one of the things, the reason babies can scream all night is because their vocal folds are very soft. It's like they've got boxing gloves on. And you're not that far removed from your voice changing. And so the stability of the voice is still being settled. But what I would do, you're probably going into, if you're having trouble around F4, which is not unusual at that age, if it's still light and thin, I'm not over concerned about that at 17, but I understand you want more oomph in your voice. So look, here's what I would do, is working up to that F4. So you said F4 to B4. Yeah? So what I would do is just go a little bit below that F4, okay, where you can feel a little more secure. And again, I love that one exercise. The narrow W really gets the vowel narrow, and then as the mouth opens, it's kind of like a filter sweep. Because if I kept it it's too narrow. If I started on ha, it's going to be too wide and shouty. But one tends to be this nice crowbar to get into it. And what you want to feel, look, if you're light initially, one, that's fine. Then you can start to add just a little more compression. What's going to give you more power again? Your vocal cords, we want them to stay closed longer. When we are singing lightly, yeah? So on this A440, my vocal cords are opening and closing 440 times every second. But on a very light sound, they're closing and then they're staying open longer. They close quickly, stay open longer. On a more robust sound, they're closing, opening quickly and closing. So they're still doing the same number of openings and closings, but when you're singing stronger, they're staying closed longer. So you want to start working in that feeling. And a good way, the way I feel it, is almost like a cow. Go like a cow, gonna moo. And you'll kind of feel yourself above that pressing down. As opposed to pressing up. There you go. And then you can start to bring in one. A little feeling of that. So that again, if I'm light, they're not staying closed as long. So the more you can feel that but the trick is it doesn't go to and you've overshot. It takes a while, and actually you never stop working on it to get that feel of just how much you need to close the vocal cords. So the guitar. So if you, strap is tangled up in everything. Hold on. So on a guitar, yeah? When you're first learning to play, you'll likely use too much tension and you're really squeezing, or you'll go to play a chord and it's all clunky because you haven't pressed hard enough. And it's just getting that feel of just the right, without squeezing the heck out of it. You have to work in the touch, and the touch takes time. And as tricky as it is on guitar, it takes longer for the voice. So it's always working that touch, that So even again, working little, sorry, so I can gently come into that rather than but just developing that little touch is going to help as well. And then as you get the touch, then you can start to feel, now I can increase it. I can give a little more, a little more press. Hopefully that answers your question. So Brandon, I know smoking is ill-advised, but I have noticed that if I have recently smoked, it temporarily relieves me of a pain that I've been feeling in my throat for the past 4 years. When I sing, it's also relieved temporarily after a decent run. Am I breathing incorrectly? You know what? That's a really interesting question. My thought, the smoking, I would think, is perhaps dulling some of your sensory input. And maybe that's why you're not feeling the pain. I would, if you have pain when singing and it lasts for more than a week or so, I highly recommend you see an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And if you can, if you have the ability to see an ear, nose, and throat doctor, a laryngologist is preferred. This is somebody who really specializes in the voice as opposed to the ears, yeah? And if they have a rigid scope, so the scope is the camera. They're going to do an endoscopy. And the less expensive machines go up through your nose. There's reasons for doing that one, but the rigid one is a bit more expensive, and it can also take video, and it tends to be better, higher resolution. And then anyone, if you go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, when the doctor is showing you the video of your voice, if you've had an endoscopy, ask permission, take out your phone and film this. Film the video, because you can send that to other specialists for a second opinion. It's incredibly valuable. You do want to have that information. It's relief temporarily after a decent run. I'm not sure if it's a breathing thing. I know smoking. Look, if there wasn't benefits from smoking, no one would do it. So there are some benefits from smoking. Number one is it helps you concentrate. It helps you digest food. That's why writers would very often smoke. But it's far outweighed by the detriments to your health. And actually, that dragging of smoke across the vocal folds after a period of time is incredibly harsh and damaging. An ear, nose, and throat doctor friend of mine, a laryngologist, did an endoscopy of a client, a patient, looked at the patient's vocal folds. The patient went out and smoked marijuana, which they apparently weren't in the habit of, and came back the next day. And yes, it's only one incident, so of course that's not a large sample study, but the vocal folds were noticeably inflamed the next day. So if that is something you partake in, you might want to consider edibles. That's smoke being drug across your vocal folds is just, this instrument, it's just not a good idea. Let me see. Oh, okay. Allie, how can we practice singing more softly and quietly when we're in the upper portion of our range? When I sing high notes, I tend to raise the volume and brightness. I can't keep it light. So what I would do is just work very, very light sounds on rounded vowels. The vowel you choose is also going to be part and parcel with how loud and bright the voice is. So when you're singing these bright vowels, I would imagine your mouth is not rounded, but rather more open. And I'm not saying that's bad. We need to be more open in the right way for higher notes. But I would do little coo, 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 a little coo, like a cuckoo clock. Coo, 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 coo. And then, little by little, we're going to increase the level of vocal fold contact and resistance. So coo becomes gug with a little cry. Gug, 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 gug. Then you can open that slightly. Gug, 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 gug. Just work that. Coo to g as in good to g as in gut. Coo, g, g. And when you add that G, don't make the G really hard. G, g. It's a little g, 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 just to give a little bit of resistance. What you want to do, again, it's working in that feel of vocal fold resistance without squeezing. It tends to be, when we're first learning to sing, it's like a switch. We're either, especially in the upper register, we're either squeezing or falling apart, squeezing or falling apart. And what we want is a dimmer switch, is a dial. So we can add a little more, pull back, but the vowel will help as well. Watch the vowel that you're doing those exercises on. So Ethan, why would Joe Estill do many experiments? You know, I or is it Estill? I can't speak to Joe. I have not trained in Estill. I know some fantastic teachers that have been trained in that method. There's experiments, yeah, and then there's like true studies, larger studies. So if she's done those, she maybe had a lot of volunteers. She maybe had a lot of time. But basically, my main method of technique, I don't claim to have a main method anymore. I don't give it a name. I mean, I used to be SLS. I still primarily use a lot of the SLS exercises, but I use them in my own way. I try and be informed by science, research, inspiration from other teachers. So I'm not really interested at this point of, is this camp right or is this camp wrong? So again, if you're really finding SLS works for you, or what's being called SLS these days, man, stick with it. Stick with what works. I think it's great, but I would just encourage you not to get in the mindset that it's the only thing that works. And again, you know, we still don't know everything about the voice. We're still discovering things all the time about this amazing instrument. And what I love is there are other fields of study and thought that are now coming into voice training. Certainly movement training and the understanding of fascia, that netting that holds us all together, that collagen-like substance that's just remarkable. I would look into that. Neuroscience, the power of imagery, neuroplasticity in the brain. It's very fascinating. When I was really struggling with my voice, working it so that I could sidestep where my voice was having trouble, and then I could find another way, right? So my tremor, I'll show it to you. E-A-I-O, E-A-I, right? If I allow that tremor, I get that spasm. So if I E-A-I-O, 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 I can override it. It's still there, but I've found a way for my brain to go around it. So there's so many methodologies. It's what works. It's what works for you. Yeah, B flat 4. So Joshua, so take what I said. Yeah, because look, you're 17. You're obviously much younger than I am. You're a higher voice type. So what I'm feeling on F and F sharp, you may be feeling on A. Into that B flat 4. So just do the same things that I talked about. What you're likely doing is you're probably going to a reinforced falsetto, and people will kind of think of that as a mix, and it's a way to find your way into a mix. You know that. I'm just guessing, but it's working so you get a little more depth, a little more contact at the vocal folds, right? Just watch that vowel doesn't go too wide, and watch that you don't start squeezing. Yeah, subglottal pressure, how to regulate it with exercises and through the vowel. So subglottal pressure. So the glottis is the opening at the vocal folds, and then subglottal is below. So what happens is when the vocal folds are closed, right, we build up an amount of subglottal pressure. We want to make sure that this flow of air versus resistance to the air is in balance. If we send too much air, then the vocal folds are going to blow apart prematurely, and we know where vocal power comes from is during the closed phase. So we don't want too much air, too much subglottal pressure to either interrupt that closed phase, make the cords blow open prematurely, or to have the vocal folds begin to squeeze in order to hold it back. So it's really working that balance of air and vocal fold resistance. Breathing, very simply, I will tell you, getting good questions about studies. To my knowledge, they've looked at breathing. There's no study that's found one method of breathing better than another. There's just, voice teachers will all agree, breathing like this is not good. But if we've got the chest kind of up, noble, proud posture, ribs are open, diaphragm drops, belly expands, there are two main schools of thought. You press out from the hypergastric area, which is hypogastric, which is below the belly button. You can feel that if you put your fingers a couple inches below your belly button. Say, huh, huh. You feel a little muscle kick out. Use that muscle. You press out, or you pull in. The way I find works is if you're singing a longer phrase, if you don't want to sing incredibly strong, the press out gives a nice controlled flow of air. If you're going to belt, the pull in will flow a little more air. And as you flow a little more air, you increase that resistance. But again, it's all within balance. There are debates as to how long a closed phase can be before it's squeezed or pressed, as they say. Just know that it at 0% is silence. At 100% closed phase is silence. And then in between is breathy to balanced to strong to pressed, and then to totally closed off. So it really is just playing with that airflow. But I love to do things like this, just feeling that muscle. Hey, sorry. Hey, ho, ha, ha, he. And watching, I don't get he, hey, hey, ho. And just let it be from that airflow from here. So this feeling of support, right? The system's not collapsing. So I've got this kind of this barrel underneath me, and I just get this gentle, this appropriate flow of air. Word of caution, do not take in too much air. This feeling of wanting to shove every bit we can into the lungs is problematic because your lungs have elastic recoil. And if you've got them to where you've really filled them, as soon as you start letting the air out, they're going to do a quick burst of because there's too much pressure. And so it's going to be hard to balance the voice when you're going to get this uncontrolled onslaught of air at the vocal folds. Admiralty, you were watching my So Young reaction. Oh, she's so good. Any plans on reacting to her other performances? I will say yes, but I'll also say I've had more trouble reacting to So Young. There are just some companies, rights holders in Asia that don't block your video. They give you a copyright strike. And as you know, copyright strikes on YouTube, if you get 3 of them within a 90-day period, you're gone from YouTube forever. Your channel's gone and you can't open another one. So I'm a little careful. Alice, you bought Boldly Belting. Thank you so much, and you love it. My question is about resonance. Do you have exercises that can safely help brighten the voice? I worked on it with and it helped me. Yes, yes. So, and Helga, yes, boldly belting is a course that I have that teaches people to belt. And what I've done is it has exercises, but more importantly, I've actually created special songs and song fragments that use certain vowel consonant combinations to help you learn vocal balance while using words and melody and not just exercises, because very often people feel they work exercises, but then it all falls apart in songs because songs don't care about keeping you balanced. So I've done a hybrid of songs. So the lyrics aren't great poetry, but they work, certain vowel combinations and everything. But it is a course, I used to have it for sale individually, but you can get it as part of voiceschool.com, which is my subscription course. And I will tell you the price is going to be going up on that soon. So here's my little commercial. Go to voiceschool.com and actually go to voiceschool.com/free. You can try it free for 14 days and you can grab the lower price because it's going to be going up. But how can I exercises that can safely brighten the voice? So what makes a voice bright rather than dark? It is when we sing a pitch, we actually have many pitches within that sound. When I sing, I'm actually producing this pitch as well as this. Those are called harmonics. And they're also called overtones, but harmonics are a more precise subset of overtones. But you can call them either one. But so what happens is when we tune the vocal tract to bring out the lower harmonics, we get a warmer, also duller sound. When we adjust the vocal tract to align the resonances with the higher harmonics, we get a brighter sound. So what I would do is I would use little edgy exercises. Those little twangy sounds. Now that's going to have a high larynx, but it's okay. We're not squeezing. And you just start to find that edge. Hey, ha. And that brightness is accomplished not just with the vowel where we think like the lips, but also with these really essential narrowings in the throat, in the upper throat. So it's not a squeeze at the vocal folds. Think of it as like a pyramid. Yeah? So if I squeeze my vocal folds, right? But if I squeeze here, if I narrow here, I don't like the word squeeze. Now I can start to get it, right? Now that's a thin, overly bright sound, but so I can find my way into the higher notes. And the higher notes actually need a certain amount of brightness if you want to sing them strongly. Now, if you want to sing something softly, narrowing everything takes the energy off of those higher frequencies, and then those sound waves move slower. And when you pull the energy off the fast moving ones, those slower ones, they're warmer, they're less loud in terms of perception. So that's a really good way to work it. So start working some of those little twangy, extra bright sounds little by little, and then you can start to modify those into more finished sounds. Yeah, compressed, breathy falsetto. Sorry. Yeah, Joshua. So let me see. When I mentioned mixed voice, I meant compressed, breathy falsetto, for making any sense. It allows me to belt up to C5s and D5s up to F5. I mean, that's really high. Good for you. Then I break into my head voice. Yeah. So getting into, again, that F4, B4, if you can't consistently belt up there, my guess is that this idea of belts, don't view belt as being completely removed from mix. I tend to view, and even belt is not just one thing. Belt is like on this continuum. And I use this example all the time. Think of color, right? The slowest vibration that we see as color, we see as red. And then as those waves get faster, we see an orangish red, and then a reddish orange, and then orange, and then the orange starts to take on a yellow tint. Yeah? We don't just suddenly go from pure red, and now there's just one type of pure orange. And so it is with your voice. So I want you to think of belt maybe as being a little bit more of an intense mix for now. Watch the vowels, man. When you're going to that F4, again, keep those vowels more on the narrow side. B is a beautiful one. B like book. B, 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 b. Just work that. And then as it feels better, you can start to lean into them a little bit more and a little bit more. But I don't want you to think of, it sounds to me like what you're thinking of as belt in that area of your voice is you're taking the first resonance. They'll call it pulled chest, register violation, M1, whatever you want to call it. The acoustics of it is you have this lower resonance that's a little more associated with the throat. And in order to keep raising that resonance, we start to squeeze at the throat and raise the larynx. And then we also start to over widen the lips. And that's what you're likely doing is you're relying on that first resonance too much rather than keeping the first resonance involved, but letting that second resonance come in. And that's where learning to develop a really strong mix is essential. Yeah, if your mix is nasal and thin, again, your larynx is likely too high. And you're probably overdoing that twang. Yeah. Don't find nasal. And nasal itself, that's a misunderstood term. So true nasal is when I allow my velum, right, this little pull at the top like this. This is a really nasal voice. This is not a nasal voice. It just, the sound we associate with being nasal, but it's just a high larynx, very twangy. So just watch how much you're doing that. Start working some lower larynx exercises. Yaspis, hello, good to see you. Philip, teacher gave me an exercise to sing the notes of a song on the syllable he. It feels to me by doing this exercise every day, my voice gets stronger and richer. Am I fooling myself? No, you are not. That's a great exercise. And look, if it works on he, what else will it work on? Will it work on huh, one, ba? Do it on different vowels and see how that works for you. And then try some more open vowels. Maybe a bit more on an ah, even towards ah. If that gets away from you, then pull it back. But yeah, I love that. I love taking the melodies of songs and using exercise sounds and incorporating those into the melody and then sneaking back into the lyrics. Or another great thing you can do is do the lyrics, but remove all the consonants and just work the vowels and feel yourself. Do it slowly, moving from vowel to vowel. What adjustments do you have to make? What modifications in the vowels do you need to make in order to maintain vocal balance? Jay, I'm a very inspiring communicator. Thank you. The way you've navigated your tremor issue is admirable. It shows how passion and intention can overcome obstacles. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate that. It's, again, when I got the diagnosis, I allowed myself to be upset. And I was pretty upset, but just for about 15 minutes. I kid you not. And then I stopped because one of the things I do for mindset that I find helpful is meditation, and also, to the best of my ability, my wife will tell you otherwise, but Stoicism. And in Stoic philosophy, you have this concept of the Stoic gods. You can call it fate, you can call it whatever you want, whatever your religion, but you've been handed something by the universe. And in Stoicism, this is a gift because the Stoic gods are testing you. And it is only through being tested that you improve. And so at that moment, I said, okay, this is a gift, and I'm going to learn from this. And I did. I learned. I am still learning an incredible amount about my voice, about the voice, about different methods. Really helped me seek out other methods of understanding the voice and even other disciplines and imagery, cueing, all of these things. It's incredibly important, but thank you for that. When is too much chest voice for a woman? And start working on other aspects of her voice. So, yeah, I would always be working on all aspects of the voice, even if you're not doing them in a really strong, robust way. So I'll take a typical scenario, a female voice that maybe has been trained classically. So in classical music, the tessitura, or where the notes tend to sit, is higher than contemporary music. And so those higher notes, the tuning of classical, singing for a soprano in classical music is different than in contemporary. And those higher notes, that's when the voice starts to get its wheels under it in that higher tessitura. Those notes themselves have more energy. The baseline pitch is vibrating faster when I talked about all those harmonics, right? The fundamental, the first harmonic has energy. In lower notes, that's a little slower. So when we're putting a lot of energy in these lower harmonics to make that warmer, flutier sounding voice, in the tessitura, the kind of general range of contemporary music, it doesn't work. So we need to start bringing in more of this chest quality, if you will. And very often the female singer will feel that they have a weak chest. So they start working on their chest. Now, when you first start discovering that chest voice, it's wonderful. You start having more energy down there. The voice is louder, etc. But when you start getting to like F4, F sharp 4, suddenly there's a problem. I feel my voice start to strain. I feel like I'm starting to yell. I have to flip in order to keep going higher. So that's why you also want to work on flexibility. You want to work on mixing. You may, as you work your more robust chest exercises, also keep working on, and again, I love this progression, so in your register, going from coo, 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 that little ooh sound. Ooh, let me take it down a little lower for me. Coo, 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 coo. And then just add a little G. So now I'm just getting a little more closure, a little more compression, right? A little longer close phase, a little more energy in the sound. And then mum. You can start to build it up and build it up. So, but I would always work all aspects of the voice. What consonant are you using for those brighter exercises? Well, I'll tell you, you can use any consonant. One that I like for those really light ones, I like the K-A-Y. Because what that does, when you go to make that K, put your finger on your larynx and go to make a K. It goes up. Now make a B. It drops. So if I'm working a more finished sound, the B is wonderful, stabilizes the larynx. Edgier, brighter. Nay, N is good. What? Feel the difference between N and M. N sits a little higher than M. That's something I think not a lot of people realize. Your consonant choices also affect the resonances, and they affect the larynx. They affect the whole voice. And so it's not just the vowel, it's also the consonant. But that's a very good question. Regarding vowel combinations, I attended a songwriter clinic. I recently learned changing some lyrics to songs that are more musical, open sound. That's a revelation to me. Yeah, Jeremy. So what we need to remember about vowel modification is the vowel itself, in terms of perception to the listener, isn't really modifying. We still deliver the perception of the word, the perception of the vowel. But in how we are tuning our vocal tract versus the spoken version of the vowel to a higher version of the vowel is different. And it needs to be different. When we are on a low pitch, all of these harmonics, these various pitches that we make when we're creating a pitch, on low pitches, they're very close together. And what vowels are actually contained within each of these little micro pitches, each of these harmonics. And lower ones will tend to have an oo perception. And then it becomes o, e. And e is more of the higher perception. So when I'm going, I'm actually filtering out different harmonics and boosting other ones. When we sing higher, these harmonics start to have greater and greater distances between them. And there are less and less of them within the influence of these first two resonances. And these first two resonances are associated with vowel perception. So the vowel has to change. The tuning that makes an E on a low note is not the same as on a high note. And if you don't make modifications to the E, it's likely going to flip and go heady. That's why yodelers go yodelay, 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 ooh. E and oo love to flip. So modifications to that are essential. So yes, it is a revelation. When you start discovering vowel tuning, I don't call it vowel modification in the beginning. And then there's vowel tuning. Vowel modification gets you in the ballpark, but vowel tuning, that's where it gets fun. And that's where you start being able to adjust not just for balance, but also for color and intensity. And it's quite a remarkable palette. Stewie, late to this Q&A again. So I'm tending to do the same time. Let me see. Any tips on how to loosen, strengthen my tongue so it can be more agile, more wordy songs, dense syllables, like patter songs, tongue twisters maybe? Yeah, you can certainly do tongue twisters. I like to exercise my tongue independently. I'll stick my tongue out and then just move the back of the tongue. And you can work on just flicking the tongue. Certainly taking those down. Fast patter songs. Take a piece of software. I know QuickTime can do it. Put it into QuickTime. Do it at 80%. And then just start ticking it up and ticking it up and ticking it up. And then do it at like 101%, 102%. So you're almost going over fast. And then see how fast you can really take it and then dial it back. Can be a great way to do that. Peggy, yes, thank you for joining us. Hey everyone, that hour went very, very quickly. I want to thank you so very much. Wonderful questions today. I will do it again next week. Get on my mailing list or subscribe to my channel so you don't miss these. And yeah, if you're interested in voice school, where I've got all kinds of singing courses as well as live monthly classes I get on. I do this in my voice school. I actually bring people on and coach them live. So it's a more focused version of this. So if you'd like to check that out, voiceschool.com/free, you can get a free 14-day trial. And if you go to my website, johnhenny.com, you can get my book, Beginning Singing, for free. I've got right up there in the header. You can just click. All it takes is your email address, and you can get my digital download of my book for free. We'll talk next week. Take care.